Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone, on a beautiful, well, in the Bay Area, it's raining, but I'm not sure where everybody else is at, but it's raining, and we're going to just get started with a little short video, and then we will commence with our speaker.
Welcome to today's session, everyone.
We are PreMed CC, a student-led organization established in the fall of 2021.
Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities, with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians.
And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone.
We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation pre-med students,
people that lack the financial resources, or just those who do not know people in the medical field.
One of the best parts about our events is that they are virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home.
We typically have events on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and on Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 12:30 Pacific Standard Time.
If you aren't able to attend the event, all of our sessions are uploaded on our YouTube channel.
Many of our sessions will end up with a Q&A with the speakers.
Any questions that you have, you may put it in the Q&A session on Zoom, and our team members will read them and have them answer.
After you have attended our event, you can log into our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to our session today.
If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will be awarded a certificate to show that you attended our session today.
If you want to stay connected with the upcoming events or just want to tell your pre-med friends about the PreMed CC, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok as @PreMedCC.
All right, everyone, welcome to today's session. I'll be introducing our speaker today. All right. Olujimi Ajijola, MD, PhD, serves as the Associate Director of the UCLA Cardiac Arrhythmia Center and EP programs. He directs the Neurocardiology Research Program and co-directs the UCLA-Caltech Medical Scientist Training Program. He's an Associate Professor of Medicine Cardiology and Molecular, Cellular, and Integrative Physiology. His laboratory studies the peripheral neural circuits that regulate the heart, utilizing cutting-edge genetic, optical, and computational tools to examine how this dysregulation drives arrhythmiogenesis and sudden cardiac death risk. Clinically, he's an interventionalist cardiac electrophysicist with expertise in a broad range of heart rhythm disorders. Dr. Ajijola started his educational journey at J. Sargent Reynolds Community College in Richmond, Virginia, and subsequently received his BA with distinction from the University of Virginia, his medical degree from Duke University, and his PhD in molecular, cellular, and integrative physiology from UCLA as part of the STAR program. His clinical training in internal medicine and cardiology, cardiac electrophysiology were performed at the Massachusetts General Hospital and at UCLA, respectively. He is also an alumnus of the National Academy's New Voices program, a recipient of the NIH Director's New Inventor Award, the Jeremiah Stamler Young Investigator Award. He was elected to the American Society for Clinical Investigation in 2023. He is currently a sitting member of the National Academy's Roundtable on Black Men and Women in Science, Engineering, and Medicine. He is nationally recognized advocate for medical and physician-scientist training, recently receiving the Chan Zuckerberg Science Diversity Leadership Award for these efforts. Welcome today.
Thank you so much, Nishita and Jubin, for the really kind invitation to be here. And, I'm just looking at the attendees, and I'm just really excited to see all of you. I see some names that I recognize, and someone from my lab is actually here. So I may have to call on you to make sure that I'm actually saying things correctly, Justina. So thanks for joining. And also I have to give a shout out to Christian Wooten, who worked with me for a few years. He's a medical student at UCLA now, just doing really phenomenal things. And I guess has been part of this organization for some time. So I'm really, really excited to see all of you on this call. So what I would love to do this evening is I have about 20 minutes of slides or so just to sort of walk through how things happened for me. And what I've done is sprinkle a few nuggets through those slides. So if you'll allow me, I have a large monitor, so I have to just share a portion of my screen. So let me see if that works. And it kind of does. So let me see if I go to slideshow mode. All right, I think this largely works. Again, thanks for having me. So I changed the title of the talk because, the title that this sort of session had was The Road to MD PhD Excellence. I think if I could say so, my humility would not allow me to accept such a topic because I feel like I'm still trying to find excellence myself, and I'm still on that road. So I don't know that I found it yet, but at least I can share some aspects of my journey with you all. So first of all, here are my disclosures and some of my funding sources. I need to update this slide. As mentioned, I recently received the Chan Zuckerberg Award, which is a very important award for me because I think it underscores why I'm here today. To start with, let me just tell you a little bit about what I do. I am very interested in ventricular arrhythmias. So ventricular arrhythmias are the leading cause of sudden death. So that's when someone obviously dies suddenly, but it's because it's an electrical rhythm of the heart that is very chaotic, and the heart is not able to function well in that rhythm, and so that can lead to someone dying pretty suddenly. And as Nishita mentioned, I'm an interventional cardiac electrophysiologist. So what that means is that I do procedures just like what's shown down here, where I use the vascular system in the body, so arteries and veins, to navigate catheters to the heart under fluoroscopy and using other techniques to correct heart rhythm disorders like what you're seeing here. So just to orient you to this is a shell of someone's heart. So we would recreate what you're looking at on the top screen here from a procedure just like this. And what you're seeing electrical waves propagating through someone's heart. And what you can readily gather is that this is going in a circular fashion. Right. Normally, the heart should get electrically activated in one direction, and that same direction you should see that on successive heartbeats. But instead, what you're seeing here is a round and round and round sort of electrical circuit, and this is called monomorphic ventricular tachycardia. This can lead someone to pass out, or this can degenerate into a worse rhythm called ventricular fibrillation. And if someone doesn't get a defibrillation or shock to the heart, that person would die. Essentially, a rhythm similar to this is what Damar Hamlin, the Buffalo Bills player, had when he had the commotio cordis and got bumped in the chest. So this is what I do clinically, and do other things like putting pacemakers and things like that. But in terms of my research, we're very interested in how the nervous system contributes to this arrhythmia that you're looking at here. And it turns out that for a variety of reasons, I have just another 1 or 2 slides or so, the nervous system can actually trigger this rhythm here. Our lab uses small animals, large animals, and we do mechanistic studies in humans to try to address these questions that I've posed to you. How does the nervous system trigger these dangerous rhythms in the heart? And to sort of give you an example, this is a patient that I took care of personally myself back in somewhere around 2010 2010 or 2009. And this patient, sorry for all these acronyms, but it was a 52-year-old man with non-ischemic cardiomyopathy and a poorly working heart from prior drug use. And the patient came in with that same arrhythmia I showed you that was beating at about 180 to 200 beats a minute. And this is the patient's hospital course. And the y-axis here shows basically it's an index of the severity of their arrhythmias. And the x-axis is the length of time the patient spent in the hospital. And you can see that this patient was in the hospital for about 30 days before we got control of the patient's arrhythmias. And in fact, what really got control of the patient's arrhythmias was intervening on the nervous system rather than all of the things that we know to do, like catheter ablation, medications, and things like that. So when I took care of this patient, and this happened for me, when I experienced this, I was really fascinated by this area, and this has driven my passion for what I do in terms of research till this day. So this is an image of a mouse's heart, and what you're looking at here are the nerves that are just scattered throughout the whole heart. So the heart is actually full of nerves. People never think of that the heart actually has so many nerves in it. In addition to that, there are also many neurons that sit on the heart itself. So there are these fat pads that are on our hearts. And within those fat pads, there are lots of neurons that make sure that the heart's working on a beat-to-beat basis. And it turns out that when the heart is injured, the nervous system and all of the cells that are within it, they can remodel in response to that. Also, those nerves that I just showed you in the heart, they can also remodel. And together, the two things drive those arrhythmias that I showed you. So I don't want to belabor this too much. But so that's really the first part I just wanted to introduce, which is a little bit about myself and what I do in terms of my clinical and my research work. So my career path has sort of been mentioned already. I started off in community college because I came from outside the country, and you know, I just sort of wasn't sure I was ready for the 4-year university. So I started off at a community college in Virginia and did well there, transferred to our big state school, University of Virginia, for the remaining 2 years or so. And then I went off to med school at Duke. I fell in love with research as an undergrad. It was sort of fortuitous, and I'm happy to get into that a little bit later. But I fell in love with research as an undergrad, but I wasn't sure that I wanted to dedicate my career to doing research. I knew I wanted to be a physician, but wasn't sure I wanted to do research. So I kind of ran away from the MD PhD path, even though many people had talked to me about doing MD PhD. But nonetheless, I took time off in med school to do research. I spent 2 years of my 5 years in med school doing research, and I still wasn't convinced. And I went off to residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. And when I was looking for fellowships, the desire to do research sort of crept back in, and I found a program at UCLA called the STAR program that really would allow me to get formally trained in research as well as clinical cardiology. And so that's why I moved to the West Coast. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then I did a PhD in molecular, cellular, and integrative physiology. Then I did another fellowship in cardiac electrophysiology, and I did a postdoc also here at UCLA with someone who had just been recruited, who happened to be known as one of the fathers of neurocardiology. And so I've gotten a bunch of awards and things since then. So if I could be an example of, if you could define my career so far as successful, then this is what I think success looks like. And what people see, this is very, very true. And I think for most people, but certainly true for me, because this is what most people see. I think many of you have seen this image before, and it's called the iceberg illusion, which is that you think it's just something floating on the surface, but you don't see all the stuff beneath it. And success is very much an iceberg, right? For everything that is an accolade or an attribute that you see, there are probably 4 or 5 things that I tried and didn't get to get that one thing. And so what it really requires is persistence, failure. Failure is very, very much part of success. Success is not the absence of failure, but it's actually a path through failure. Okay. Sacrifice, disappointment, many things you won't get. If it comes up, I'll tell you about a recent mentor that I gained who told me about a 80-20 rule that you actually have to fail about 20% of the time. And I'll tell you what he means by that. Discipline is crucial, hard work, dedication, all of those things. This is what it takes to the bottom of the iceberg to make what you see up top. So if there's any lesson I leave you with, is that you should sort of expect the things on the bottom, and it's okay. They're not going to define you. There's a concept of the un-CV. Your CV is all the great things that you've accomplished and all your nice publications and awards and all those things, but your un-CV is the antithesis of your CV, which is all the things you failed at. And I'm going to list a whole bunch of things, but for example, to get my first R01, I failed 3 times before I finally sort of got it. In fact, I've been rejected for many internal university grants, foundation grants, all sorts of things. In fact, the first time I tried to transfer out of community college, I actually didn't get in to 4-year college. So just to kind of give you a sense of some of the things. And there's many, many more rejections and disappointments. But again, these things happen and they're always going to happen. And I think what's very important is resilience, which I'll talk about in a little bit as well. So I guess my first lesson is that you should be comfortable with rejection. It definitely does not define you, and you can't win everything that you go for or apply for. And despite all of the rejection and losses, you will still be successful. Okay, so again, success, however you define it, is not the absence of failure. In fact, it's like you become more successful once you've failed enough times that you know how not to fail. So please keep that in mind. I'm trying to make sure I'm doing well on time here. So I talked about my transition from residency to fellowship. As you heard, I did community college and 4-year college in Virginia. Then I transferred to North Carolina for med school. Then I went to Boston for residency. So you can see I was sort of an East Coaster in this part of the country. And I ended up in fellowship all the way down here on the West Coast. And that's a pretty big transition to make for someone who didn't grow up in this country and who had only known literally 3 states in the US, all within kind of the relatively same geographic area. So the way that happened is through this gentleman who unfortunately passed away, and it still chokes me up when I think about him. But I met Galen Wagner when I was interviewing for medical school. And I interviewed at Duke, and they were touring us through some places. And he happened to be, this was way back in the day before Zoom and all these video conference and things. And they happened to be doing a conference with some people in Sweden. And so this would have been circa 1997, something like that. And I'd never seen that before. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like, you mean the people on the other side of the screen are in Sweden? He's like, yeah, they're in Sweden. And we're discussing ECGs and things like that. And he said, well, if you end up at Duke University, you should come talk to me. And, like most things I'm telling you, I had gotten interviews at a lot of different medical schools, one of which was Harvard University. And I was really excited that, oh my God, I might get to go to Harvard. But then I actually didn't get into that med school, and Duke was my second choice. And I'm happy to say that. And I got into a whole bunch of other really good schools, but I chose to go to Duke. And my relationship with this man really helped me so much over the course of my career. He's a clinician, scientist, mentor, and world-renowned electrocardiologist. Most things we know about the EKG, many things we know about the EKG and how to diagnose heart attacks and things like that came from Galen Wagner. And the way Galen helped me make the transition from Boston to Los Angeles is that he called me out and he said, because I called him to discuss where I would go to fellowship. And I was talking about UCLA and that I liked it, but I kept trying to find reasons not to go to LA, find reasons to stay in Boston, because the hospital where I was had sort of indicated that I could stay there for fellowship if I wanted. And he called me out. It's like, why are you afraid? It sounds to me like you're afraid of what your gut is telling you to do. And it was really the first time I think it kind of clicked for me that I was trying to talk myself out of what I wanted to do because I was uncomfortable. And he helped me a lot by doing that. And just sort of as a lesson, what was I leaving behind in Boston? Why was I so afraid of leaving? What was that comfort that I had in Boston? Was another person. This is Jack Singh. And I was interested in electrophysiology when I got to Mass General for my residency. And Jad was a mentor I had. My first publication ever was with JAG. And I didn't want to leave that because we'd worked so well together. But I'm glad I kind of did that, because what I was afraid to leave behind was something that I had started, in Boston, which was this database where we would collect blood from inside people's hearts and store it and create this biobank. And it was kind of really the first of its kind. And I did that as a resident, and I was afraid to leave it behind, but I did anyway and came to LA. And just to show how awesome of a mentor Jag was that he called me and said, hey, that thing that you started, we continued it, and we have blood on all these hundreds of patients. And if you ever want to use it, it's your baby, you started it, you can come and get access to the bloods. And so I flew to Boston, I aliquoted the bloods, I brought it back to California. Long story short, the first thing we tested for was hugely successful, made it into this journal called JAMA Cardiology, which is one of the top journals in cardiology, and got covered by a lot of news outlets and things like that. And the point I'm making with this, it led to me getting some awards and this news piece and things of that nature. And the reason I'm raising this is that I made a decision that I didn't feel very comfortable with. But I think that there's a lot of growth and opportunity that you will gain from making that kind of a decision and leaving your comfort zone. When you're doing something that you're very comfortable with, you don't grow as much as if you're placed in some adversity, not too much, some adversity. So that discomfort is important. So next lesson, trust your gut. I was trying to talk myself out of trusting my gut, but Dr. Wagner made me not do that. The other thing is to trust your mentors. You've chosen them as mentors for a reason, and they see things that you can't see. And Dr. Wagner saw something that I couldn't see. He saw me trying to fight my gut, and he called me out. And when you pick mentors and they tell you things that you don't want to hear, or things that make you uncomfortable, I think you shouldn't run away from that person. That's actually someone that you should really keep in close touch with, because they're telling you the truth. Many times there are things, you're in situations that you can't really see the bigger picture, and you need to be able to trust someone to see that for you. And a good mentor will do that for you. So trust them. So speaking of mentors, here's a list of most of my mentors. And I'll make another point with that mentorship isn't one person. It's you need a mentorship team. I can tell you all sorts of stories about each one of these people. There are people from all over the country. There are people here who are just, been deans of medical schools. In fact, 3 of these people are deans of medical schools, and, just have done really incredible things. But here are my mentors. Key thing about this, it's a lot of people. They're not all men. They're not all Black or white or Indian or whatever it is. It's all sorts of people, and so it's really important for you to not expect that your mentors are all going to look a certain way. I think that you should get mentorship where you find good people, no matter who they are, because each person brings a different perspective, and that's going to be crucial for you. So these are kind of my mentors, that people I look up to. Then I have a different set of mentors. Those are my near peer mentors. And these are people that are about my age, or people I'm training with. And they are people that I can quickly call up and say, hey, because your senior mentors went through what you're going through a long time ago. These people are going through it at the same time. And so you can really check in with them. They can be a nice, good check and balance. And it's really critical to build this network. And I'm going to talk a little bit about networking in a second. One of the last points I want to make is about mentorship versus sponsorship. There are mentors who are people, again, a team of people. They can see all the facets of who you are and they help you grow. They basically tell you which door to go knock on and which door to try to go through. That's a mentor, gives you advice, listens to you, gives you advice, and points you in a direction. A sponsor is someone who would actually walk with you through that door or use the key to open that door and let you go through it. So a mentor might point you to say, go through door A. A sponsor is someone who actually puts the key in, unlocks the door and opens it for you. So these are the types of people who will speak your name when you're not in the room, when people are looking for someone to give a talk, someone to get an award, someone to get a grant. And it's important to know the difference between the two. Usually your sponsor is also someone who's a mentor. So the goal is usually that you're trying to turn your mentors into sponsors. And we can talk maybe in the Q&A about how to do that. And so again, a good example is a mentor might say, have you tried applying to speak at conferences and meetups already? And a sponsor will say, I recommended you for this, I put your name in, right? So make sure that you're trying to turn your mentors into sponsors as well. And I'm not going to go through this, but in the interest of time, but let me go to lesson 4, which is to build a team of selected mentors and sponsors. You're going to talk to a lot of people. A lot of people are going to give you advice freely. But to me, I hold the word mentorship and sponsorship in somewhat higher regard, because these are people that you develop a relationship with and you go to over and over and over again. This past 3 days ago, this past weekend, rather, one of my very, very first mentors, who was a dean of a medical school, sent me an email. Hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. I saw you doing this, and then we reconnected and we talked. So you got to keep in touch with them. Okay. Let them know when good things happen in your life. Don't only reach out to your networks when you need something. That sends the wrong message. Lesson 5, learn to network. That's how you build this team of mentors and sponsors. They're going to be people that you need to network with. It might be someone that is a big doctor at some institution that you think you want to go to, or someone who's done something that you're interested in and you'd like to know, wow, how did they do that? You have to learn to ice break and talk to people. It's a naturally uncomfortable thing to do, but it's crucial that you learn how to do that. And again, we can talk about some techniques, but the key thing is most people will be willing to talk to you. I think you'll be surprised at how much it's sort of an innate human a feeling or a property that when someone wants to learn from you, we tend to be, react to that positively. So most people will be willing to talk to you. You'll be surprised. And so networks and your support structure help you become resilient. Okay, so all those failures, all those things that I showed you, the things that don't go well, they're going to happen. And the way that you keep trucking along is through resiliency. And part of that resiliency is built by having an entire ecosystem around you that supports you. That ecosystem is made up of your mentors, near peer mentors, family, friends. You got to nurture that network. Per ardua surgo is a Latin word for, what essentially translates to resilience, which means through hardship, I rise. Through hardship, I rise. So success, rising, all those things, again, they don't happen in the absence of adversity or hardship. It really means through adversity, I rise. That's really what it translates to. So resilience is key and important. I'm going to skip this and just kind of say these things really quickly. I think it's important to be intentional about building your CV, and think about each opportunity that comes, how to maximize and leverage that. We can talk about that. Learn to tactfully say no. There are going to be many things that come your way. It's very important to learn to say no. Give back, very important. I have that in bold. I can't say that enough. When you give, I truly believe that somewhere there's a record being kept in the universe somewhere, and when you give, you get more back, and it really just enriches your life. And in terms of most of you, I think most people here obviously want to be physicians or physician scientists. I just want to say something that, especially for being a physician scientist, it's not a destination, or even being a physician. It's sort of a destination, but it's really not, because it's a journey. And every day you're learning, and every day things are happening to you, and some of it are things you expected and want, and some of it are things that you don't want. But all of that is the process. There isn't some destination you get to at which point everything is fine, and so that's a point I wanted to make. Also very important is work-life balance. Some people call it, I call it work-life integration, because it doesn't, when you say work-life balance, it means you're either working or you're enjoying life. But to me, I'm passionate about what I do, and I feel like I can do both of those things at the same time. So, to me, I think it's more about integrating than balancing. And you sort of have to decide what's important to you. But you need to be organized and have boundaries. If not, things are going to push you into all sort of different directions always. So part of balancing or integrating work life is having these boundaries. We can talk a little bit about that, and make sure you know what recharges you. There are some people that get recharged by talking to people. Others get recharged by running away from people. You got to figure out which one of those you are, just so that you know how to recharge. That also helps you be resilient. Some of resiliency comes from inside. So here's my work-life integration. Got 3 kids. They're all boys, and they know how to make me stop. And so it's obviously been one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. And the way I recharge is by really tapping into their boundless energy, and also recharge by reconnecting with friends and things of that nature. So I'm a kind of a half person. I need a little bit of time away from people just to kind of catch my breath, and then I need people to sort of recharge. So I figured out a system that works. So all of these I've already said, and I will stop there and take questions. So let me go ahead and stop sharing, and then that way I can answer questions.
All right, so I'll just ask the questions. And our first question we have is, how did you protect/prioritize your mental health as an undergraduate medical and PhD student?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, I was less intentional about it than I should have been. And I think I was doing things that now that I think about it, those were the right things to do to kind of balance my mental health. And that's, I like to have fun. And I have fun with people, with parties, whatever it is, So I spent a lot of time having a good time in med school. I went out a lot as a medical student. I made sure that I studied and I got my work done. But even sometimes during the week, I went out with friends, and I was always out. And so that sort of camaraderie that I had with my friends, and the fact that I wasn't just locked up studying and moping around, I think that helped me a lot. And that occurred through all of my training. There's always been friends there. So that outlet, I would say that's how I did it.
All right, our next question we have is, what is your best advice for students who are contemplating pre-med versus nursing? This attendee says that they often meet with students who are wanting to go to medical school but are unsure whether they should go to medical school or nursing.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a very important thing, because what I also see is people just think medicine, and they think that the only way to do it is by being a physician, and that's not at all true. Nursing is a fantastic way to arrive at the same um, activity, which is providing care. And in fact, it's very commonly said that nurses are the ones that actually care for the patients, although doctors get all the credit, which is, it's tongue in cheek, but it's true. So I think it's about exploring, okay, but there's a balance to it. What I find with some people's CVs when they're applying to, when I was on the admissions committee at a number of institutions, is some people overexplore. And what happens is that all of your activities look superficial. And some people underexplore, which is they have one or two activities, but then they've done, thousands and thousands of hours on that activity. What you need is a balance where you've explored enough, but at the same time, the key things that are going to drive your career, you've had sustained activity and growth in those things. What I've said may sound very, very vague, and it's going to differ for each person based on what they want to do. But I think it's important to try to be sure that you're not on either extreme, where you've done 50 activities, but each only for 10 hours. That looks way too superficial and doesn't show growth. So I think that in terms of the nursing physician thing, is just, for me, for example, when I'm screening applications and I see that someone's clinical exposure is working as a nurse's assistant, I put a lot of value in that, because you've actually been at the bedside, you've actually delivered care, and you may have seen physicians at the bedside, you've seen nurses at the bedside. So to me, that would be one good way to explore those things. Of course, spend time with physicians also separately, spend time with nurses separately.
Right. Our next question we have is, as a community college student, I'm afraid of getting rejected from a four-year college. What are you going to do next so that you can be a doctor? They mean, if you get rejected, what are you going to do next so you can become a doctor?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting frame of mind, which is the fear of getting rejected. I'd like to, I don't know whose question that is, and I don't mean to pick on anyone, but I would suggest that person needs to kind of think about that and try to work out why they are afraid of rejection. You see, if you're afraid of rejection, it's going to make you not do something. And as they say, you make none of the goals that you don't take shots at, right? So maybe
100% of people, 100% of people that don't apply to something are gonna get rejected.
Yeah, exactly. So I think maybe the question is that they're just saying it sort of colloquially, like, oh yeah, I'm afraid I might get rejected. If I do, what do I do next? So maybe that's what it is. But you can't go into anything being afraid of being rejected. In fact, this might sound a little crazy, but I have a really, really good friend, and I'm not going to say who, but that person's picture, it's a he, I've said it, that person's picture was on my near peer mentor slide. But that person they think that their positivity and their imagination about getting something when they apply for something is so strong that actually contributes to them getting something. I'm like, okay, I don't know how you could think that, but the joke the person made was, I actually will the universe to give me what I want. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but you almost have to have that level of positivity and desire and the will to want something. I think that makes you put in the best effort rather than fear. If you're doing something that you're afraid of the outcome, how do you think you're going to do? How well do you think you're going to do at that versus something that you're doing with this zeal and this energy and this drive to succeed at it? So that's kind of my point on that. Now, in terms of if you get rejected from four-year schools, got to try again. And when you're trying again, you're trying to understand by talking to people and showing people your application. Why do you think it is that I didn't get in? What could I have done differently? And then you work at those things. So don't give up. Now, I have had a few mentees over the years that ultimately didn't get into med school and chose to do something else. What I will say is that I truly firmly believe that there is no lost experience. You might do something and it doesn't go anywhere, and then you move on to something else. But some nuggets of that experience that you had trying that one thing will inevitably show its face in whatever you decide to do. One example of that is my leaving this biomarker database behind in Boston. I mean, in my mind, honestly, I thought I was done with it. I thought I'd lost it, but it somehow came back to feed into my career and really helped me in a very, very big way. So I'd say keep trying until something changes where your priorities change or your goals change, and then you move on to a new thing, and it's just going to be all good from there. You know, you can't look back at life and regret decisions you make. That just never helps anyone. So I'm sorry it's a long-winded answer to a question, but there are a lot of sort of nuggets and lessons in that I wanted to point out.
All right. Our next question we have is, do you have any advice for community college students who want to pursue research but don't have the resources of a four-year institution?
Yeah, that's a big one. What I've seen, so for me, I didn't start my research until I transferred to a four-year university. But what was somewhat interesting is that the mechanism by which I did research at a very high level, I found in my two-year college. So what I mean by that is this. When I was in my community college, I saw a flyer on the wall for something called a research supplement for underrepresented minorities, which is an NIH grant that allows someone with a big NIH grant to take you on to do research in their lab. And so I held on to this thing. And even while I was in community college, I went to a seminar that someone from the NIH was hosting where they talked about this. And so then I was prepared when I got to the four-year university. I already knew this thing. I had this thing in hand. And then I went to different labs and I said, hey, look, did you know that if you take me into your lab, you will actually get more money from the NIH? And of course, researchers always need grant funding to do their research. So there was no lab that I went to that turned me away. In fact, I picked my choice of three labs that I was considering because, again, I had the support and sure everything went well and we got the NIH grants, et cetera. So the point I'm trying to make with that is that even though you might be at a community college and you don't have access to research, there's always something you can do. Okay, so it might be that maybe in the summer you go to a four-year university, or maybe you're at a community college that has a four-year university close by, where you can carve out some time to just go, even if you're not doing something very in-depth, but just start to get that exposure. And then if you transfer to a place, then you've had some experience in picking the type of lab that you want to be in. So that would be my advice. I think that there's a lot of different, and then now these days, there's a lot of research that you could actually do virtually. Since COVID, that's been something that's happened. So you could reach out to people at four-year universities and say, your school is one of the ones I'm looking to transfer to. I'm not there yet, but I'm very interested in research. Is there anything you think I can do online? You might have to email 50 different researchers, okay? But that's where persistence comes in. And maybe one or two might actually give you an opportunity. So thinking creatively and always trying to find something to do would be a way of addressing that.
The other thing is I was going to add is we've done a lot of sessions for community college research. There's a lot of summer programs, like tomorrow there's going to be one. Next week, Dr. Milgram, somebody that you know, is coming
I
to
know her,
speak
yes.
about summer programs that she has for community college students. And you just have to show up and listen and get the insights. If you can't, we'll put the video. But there's a bunch of, she came and spoke last year, and a bunch of people that came to the session actually applied and got it. So there's a lot of opportunities, and I don't know where this person that asked the question is, but we post a lot of them. I think we've done like 5 or 6 sessions for summer research programs just for community college students. So there's a lot of resources out there.
Yeah, and I'll even add to that, Jubin, that we at UCLA have at least 2. I personally,
Yeah, I'm putting that on there as well. Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, we have our own summer program within the medical scientist training program at UCLA. There's also an NIH funded program called the CERT program, which is cultivating cultivating interest in research careers. That's run by my colleague, Dr. Kenrick Duru. That's also here at UCLA. It's a summer program, but it keeps you connected, right? So if you do that in a lab, then maybe when you're back in community college, you can do things remotely with that lab.
Yeah, and there's also a CERC program that's done through Charles Drew and UCLA, and we've posted that on our
That's the
social
one.
media. Yeah, we've posted that on our listserv and our social media. They actually have it during the year, I think, too, summer and the year.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
And they target just LA students.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of them. I mean, we get so many of them that we keep on posting that there's a lot of opportunities. You just have to, like I said, you have to apply and go for it. Do you have the next question, Nishida?
Yep, I do. All right. So our next question we have is, how old were you when you started your journey, and do you consider your journey traditional or non-traditional? They're asking because they're a paramedic in their 30s, and they feel like maybe their window of opportunity might be closing to pursue their career goals.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna get aged on this. No, I'm just kidding.
You're 25, right?
Yeah, clearly, not a day over 24, actually. No, so yeah, so my path obviously was different from this person. I actually realized I wanted to be a physician when I was very young. I think I was about 9 or 10. But that said, I've met many people over the years. In fact, when I was in college, I volunteered for a primary care doctor whose colleague was someone who went to med school at age 40. And that person, in terms of when you finish, obviously, when you finish med school, you need to do a residency and maybe fellowship or not before you start practicing. And so this person had done family medicine as a residency, which is about 3 years, and then you're able to practice. So personally, I think it's never too late. Medicine is just incredibly rewarding if that's the thing for you. And even at age 30 or in your 30s, you still have a very long career. You're practicing still 30, 40 years at that age. So definitely don't let that be a barrier. I will also say one thing is that there's a lot of maturity and resilience that comes with being a little bit older. And when you've done other things in life and you've had other life lessons, when I sat on one admissions committee, there was someone who was very famous for saying, this person hasn't faced any adversity. I don't want the first adversity they face to be in med school, because they may not do well and they may fail out of medical school. So I bet you're someone who has a very interesting life story, someone who's built up maturity and resiliency, and would probably do very well in med school. So definitely don't let that age push you away.
We've had speakers that gentleman started med school at 47 after being a car mechanic, business owner.
Yes,
we had,
yes.
And he's an ER doctor now in Cleveland. And then we also had another medical student who was in her 50s. I actually worked with a resident who was 54, and I think her granddaughter was a medical student. So, you're going to get old no matter what, and you're going to lay in the same bed that you would either if you pursue your dreams or don't pursue your dreams. So
that's very well said.
All right. Our next question is, sorry. What is the benefit for a PhD in addition to the MD, given that some MDs run their own basic science research labs?
Yeah, this is a perennial question. I meet with a lot of students that ask me this question. You know, the difference is the formal training to do research. You know, I think that it all depends on how the MD that does research learns to do research. You see, there's nothing magical about the three letters PhD. All it means is that you've had an experience, and you've had an experience where you've asked a research question, learn how to problem solve, learn how to troubleshoot, and over a usually defined period of time. Usually most PhDs are about 4 to 6 years, okay? Now, an MD can get a very, very similar experience. You know, as an MD, you're going to be learning a lot of the basic things that PhDs will learn anyway in your basic sciences, right? You're going to learn the biochemistry and this and that. And so already you're kind of through at least 1 year of PhD because of all those basic sciences that you learn. And then the rest is a research experience. So as an MD, you know, you sort of already have that. And so what you're doing then, let's say during a postdoc, just as an MD, no PhD, where you do research, is essentially learning how to do research. My point is that the PhD just means that you've taken out the time and you've had the protected time to do research. As an MD, sometimes you don't have that protected time and you're just kind of learning on the fly. It all just depends on how you do it. So the PhD is a bit of a marker that says you went through this formalized program, you had this formalized experience that's easily transferable. Everybody knows, kind of generally speaking, what it takes to get a PhD. So there might be a little less variability in terms of the quality of your training versus an MD who's done research. It could be that they've only done research for a year. It could be that they've done research for 8 years. You don't know what sort of formal metrics and formal milestones they had to pass. So the quality tends to be a bit more variable in that regard. So the way to answer your question is that if you want to have it's like currency, or if you want to have the research cash or the experience cash to say, I have a PhD, it means I've done this and this and this, and you can play that card, then you know a PhD is definitely worth your while. But if you're an MD doing research, a lot of variability, you may need to have to do a lot more convincing in terms of what you're trying to do with your next step. For some people, it sort of just happens experientially. So you might fall into a situation as an MD that gets you to research. But usually with a PhD, you're usually having that as a primary interest, and then you pursue that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Our next question we have is as an MSTP director, what do you look for in your candidates? Is there a recommended amount of years of research a student should have?
They're looking for the secret sauce, the secret formula.
I'm happy to spill the beans, which is that there is no secret formula. So let's get away from that. So look, what we are looking for is primarily is that someone has had enough of a research exposure, okay, that they understand what being an MD PhD is, okay? And it may be that someone only did research for 2 years, but that's all they did. And they did it in a lab of someone who was an MD PhD, or was a PhD where there were a lot of MDs and they got the exposure. Someone could have done research over a 5-year period, but they were doing 5 hours a week, and you know they didn't really get much of an experience. So that's part of it. The other part of it is the ability to demonstrate to me or other directors of MD PhD programs that the experience you had has passed a threshold where we can say, yes, this person had an in-depth research experience. So what might that be? it could be a publication that you're co-author on a paper. And just so you know, you can't at least we don't want it to just be that you had honorary authorship. In our MSTP application, for example, we will ask you on this publication where you're listed as an author, which one of the figures did you make, or which one did you contribute to? What were the experiments that you did? And in your interview, we would ask you about that. And we pay a lot of attention to that, the description of the research experience. So if you felt that you've done enough research, that you understand what research is all about. You're not going to know it all the way, because you only know that once you're a PI, really, but that you've learned enough, and you know what being a physician scientist is about, and you know what research is about. You understand how people's research gets supported, which is primarily through grants. And that you have the creativity and the intellectual capacity to do it. We are trying to put all that together from what you present as an application. So your application should make sense. We tend to be more focused on the research part than the clinical part. Some people think it's 50-50. No, you, as a physician scientist, you actually end up spending more time doing research, generally speaking, than doing clinical. Most physician scientists spend 80% of their time or 90% of the time doing research rather than the clinical work. So you sort of need to understand that and need to have internalized that. And you need to be able to describe how you see your career within that framework. And so there isn't a secret sauce per se. It's really that you need to come and demonstrate to us that you have the passion and the experience from doing research previously, and enough clinical exposure that tells you you should be doing MD, PhD versus PhD alone. Okay. That's sort of what we're looking for. So I've said a lot, but I'm happy to clarify any aspects of what I've just said.
All right. Our next question we have for you is, did you take your time and go at your own pace when finishing courses? I feel a lot of pressure to be finished by a certain time to transfer and go to med school.
Let's see. I actually, okay, so I only did 3 semesters in community college. I actually transferred before I finished, so I didn't get the associate's degree. And I think you have to go at your own pace. I mean, I'm not a fan of people doing things that they are uncomfortable with just because they think they're trying to meet some metric or do what somebody else did. I think you only run the risk of things not going as well. And we've just talked about the ability to start med school when you're a little bit older, right? It's like, as long as you get to the final, kind of journey / destination, I think taking your time is important. I mean, I think you don't want to go rush something and fail at it or have a negative outcome. So definitely I would be in the take your time and go at your own pace school of things.
Yeah, the only thing is that I would add is, like, don't live somebody else's expectations that they put in front of you. Like, if you, for example, are taking care of your family members, you're watching your siblings, you're working, you obviously, if you're working 20, 30 hours a week, you can't take 4 science classes because that is a recipe for failure. You're not going to be able to do it. So if you can only take 2 classes or 1 class at a time, that's your reality, and you're gonna have to, that's your reality, and you're gonna have to adjust to that and not somebody else's expectation. Because, and don't listen to blogs, because blogs will tell you things that are just not true. And so I call them keyboard warriors. And so for for example, Dr. Ajijola, finished in 3 semesters because he's brilliant and smarter than He's no, but it's just people learn differently. I mean, if you have a learning disability, it may take you a little bit longer, but the person that takes them 4 years to finish undergraduate and 7 years, they're still called, they still get the same bachelor's degree, and person that graduates first in medical school and last, they're still called, so yeah, so don't live other people's expectations, I would say.
Yeah, let me just correct one thing. I didn't finish in three. I just had
Right.
done yeah, I'm sorry. And I had just done 3 semesters. And then I had enough credits that the 4-year college
accepted. Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I was kidding, but yes, it was my poor attempt at humor.
No, it's fine. I just want to make sure that but your point. I mean, your points are very, very well stated, and I really like that. Not the idea of not living somebody else's dream. And I think I'm obviously a little older than you guys, but I think that with technology, I think that there's a little bit of toxic positivity going out there, right? Where, on social media, most people, some people are starting to do this, but most people don't post their failures, right? So then all you see are all these people that did all these things, and they're usually not showing you the bottom of that iceberg. They're only showing the top. And I think some people can be susceptible to that, right? Then all of a sudden you start thinking that, okay, 5 people say this, then, oh my God, that's the reality. And so, I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't be on social media, but I think it's important to kind of truly put things in context. And that's where your mentors can help you as well.
All right. Our next question we have for you today is, did you take any gap years between finishing undergrad and applying to med school?
Yes, I had so because I'd done 3 semesters in community college, then it kind of put me off schedule at the 4-year university. So I ended up actually finishing in December. And then I had about 6 months. So, it's not a gap year per se. I worked as a technician in a research lab, and to be honest, I don't know if that time was, really did anything formative for me. But it was nice to have a little bit of a break. I do want to say something about gap years, and this particularly pertains to people who are thinking MD, PhD. You see, the MD, PhD path is long. And, what we MD, PhD directors around the country are seeing is that people are starting to take 1, 2, 3, 4 year of gap years, okay, to get into an MD PhD program, which on average is between 7 and 8 years before you then do a residency of 3. It's like, so you're just kind of prolonging that. And so I think if you're thinking of taking a gap year, I think 1 year makes a lot of sense. I think it's reasonable for many people to want to do that. But if you're going to do more than that, I think it's really important for you to think through why you need to do that. I mean, if there's a reason like you just can't take the MCATs in the first gap year and you need the second gap year, of course, then that's understandable. But all things being equal, I think people really need to justify for themselves why they're taking so many years. And if you don't need to, then don't. And I find myself saying this to a lot of students.
Yeah, I think just from being in this space, the problem is a lot of people listen to bad advice. And so, because I've heard somebody said that you should go do 2 years and get a master's and then apply. And it's like, you're talking about a good 5 years there, which is not necessary, but I think it's just bad advice that goes out there.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, and that's the thing is that, look, when we directors, even regular MD are looking at an applicant, we're looking at just that one applicant. We expect each person to be different. We want to see, I feel like sometimes people are trying to make their applications sound like what they think med schools want to see versus just telling us who they are and letting their kind of unique personality shine and their unique experiences shine. So when we review applications, I'm just interested in that one person at that time. And so, the point is, do what's best for you. Your application is only about you. It's only your, kind of the constellation of your experiences and goals. So don't try to do what somebody else did. Really try to focus on making yourself shine.
All right. Our next question we have for you is, would you recommend the MD PhD program, or to do each program individually?
Oof. Pros and cons. Life is all about choices. The only difference the most important difference that I see is that, you see, if you do it separately, you have a little less control over the timing. Most MD PhD programs that are at least funded by the NIH, which are called MSTPs, have a kind of a structure. If you do it separately, then you're just doing what the PhDs do and then what the MDs do without a lot of integration between the two. So the integration in an MD PhD program between the PhD and the MD, which is a very active thing, the NIH is actually asking us specifically to make sure that we're intertwining the two. Better than we did historically, is that it ends up being it could be a little bit shorter. So that's kind of one important thing. The other kind of sort of important aspect is that if you do it sequentially, particularly if you get the clinical aspect going first. So the way I did my PhD during cardiovascular disease fellowship, meaning that I already knew I was going to be a cardiologist. In fact, I was already training as a cardiologist. And then I could do research that was very closely related to what I was interested in clinically. So that's sort of the other advantage. If you do the PhD first, then you do the MD, your PhD area could end up being very, very different from the MD area, which is okay, because, again, a PhD is about the experience and learning how to ask questions and learning how to troubleshoot and problem solve and be resilient. So you could apply all the skills to a new area if you end up doing something different.
All right. Our next question we have for you today is, how do you know when to say no to opportunities when it feels like you are behind or need to do everything to move forward and succeed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. And it's not one that I've done well at. I was a victim of a piece of advice that I've given here, or actually, I think Jubin said it very well, which is not to live somebody else's dream. But I think that one of my mentors is someone who is just incredibly productive. But this person truly does not need sleep. Right? It's not that they choose not to sleep. They don't need the sleep. Okay, there are just some people like that. And I've spoken to this person's mother, actually. And the mother told me, oh yeah, that person's been that way ever since they were a little kid. They just never need to sleep. I have another colleague like that. So I think what I unfortunately tried to do was, I thought I admired this person so much that I thought I too needed to do all the same things that they did, but I need more sleep than that person did. And I think ultimately I ended up taking too much. And I've only learned over the years to truly try to say no to more things. I think the best way to learn to say no is to have kind of a value system. Okay, this might be too early for this level, but for your level. But I had a mentor who told me once that, for me to say yes to something, I needed to ask the following question. Does it earn me more money? And not that we should be doing things for money, but that's an important part of the calculus. I mean, I think you got to be realistic about life, and some opportunities you take because there's a financial incentive. Not all of them, but some of them, and it is an important consideration. Does it advance your career in a big way? Okay, that's sort of another important question. And another colleague of mine, sort of turned it around for me, which is that it's not really that should you say no or yes, but it's really, why should you say yes to this? Like, what is the value proposition of this thing, that you're considering? And that if you go in with an assumption that you're going to say no to everything and something has to rise to some level for you to say yes, it's a way of turning things on its head. But this person tried this, and this was a way that worked for them. There's sort of no right answer, but you shouldn't be doing something just to do something or just because you think it looks good on your CV. I think you truly have to look at the value proposition of whatever it is. It's a vague answer, I know, but again, it differs for each person, and it differs at each level of your training.
Our next question we have is, if someone is contemplating either the MD PhD route or the MD route separately, what last minute piece of advice would you give them?
Does it have to be last minute? If they're considering MD PhD versus MD separately, what last minute piece of advice? I don't know. I mean, I think, you see, the way I think of someone who's doing an MD PhD versus an MD, I'll just tell you, we are, I think our MD PhD program is one of the best in the country. And just my experience looking through our students is that they come with a type of a passion for research that is really just really awesome, even much more than I had at that stage. Is that these people almost feel like it's like part of their body to do research, like they would be giving up oxygen if they didn't. And to be honest, you need almost that level of passion to be entering and committing 8 years, okay, generally speaking, 8 years, potentially longer, of your life to something. So if you don't have that passion to say, hey, for the next 8 years, I can't see myself doing anything other than this, MD, PhD is your thing. If you're facing a lot of apprehension, and it's so much so that you're so uncomfortable, I said it's okay to be a little uncomfortable. You need to be a little nervous at some of these decisions. But if it's so much that you're just really can't really justify it for yourself, then I think you should start off with an MD. And there are other paths to maybe get into research later. But I think that passion and that drive is what's going to make you get up at 5 a.m. on multiple days if you needed to go to the lab to do something, and so you need to make sure you have that up front.
All right. What advice do you have for students who are trying to turn a mentor into a sponsor?
Yes. I meant to talk about this. I'm glad someone asked that. So look, you're with a mentor. To turn a mentor into a sponsor, first of all, you need to have a good relationship with them, and you need to have sort of nurtured the mentorship aspect of the relationship. To turn them into a sponsor, you need to start to telegraph. So I was in a session recently where someone called it telegraphing your pass. It's the opposite of football. In football, the quarterback never wants the defense to know which way they're going to throw the ball. Here, you want your mentor to know exactly where you're trying to throw the ball so that they readily see how they can help you. Okay, so that they know, okay, he's trying to go this direction. This is the door that they need to go through, and this is the one I can open for them. You have to learn to ask people for things. And in a way that isn't like you're just using them, but in a way that fits with your career goals after you've nurtured that relationship with them. There are some people that you'll meet that will naturally just become a sponsor. Some mentors just know to do that, but others don't. Sometimes people just don't know that, hey, I should, do X or Y for this person, but sometimes you need to ask them. So have your team of mentors. Usually you're having each mentor for a particular reason, and whatever is within the domain of that mentor, where you've nurtured that relationship, ask them. Part of the next step for me is for me to give talks at national meetings. Would you be able to recommend me for a talk or two, And then once that person does it, then they're going to get into the habit of doing it. I've had some of my mentors who are sponsors have invited me to multiple conferences, and I know it's them because of the nature of what the invitation was. And so that's kind of what you want. You might need to help encourage someone to make the ask. And if someone doesn't feel comfortable, that's okay. Maybe that's just that's not their thing, and you go a different direction. So hopefully that helps. I think again, you need to be you would have to become comfortable with asking people for things in a way that doesn't seem like you using them, and that's the way to do it.
All right, our next question we have is, as an immigrant U.S. Army veteran, combat medic, over 40, working but has kids, they're looking for an empty PhD or PhD, but are lacking recent science prerequisites. They're asking, could taking them from an online school hurt chances for admission?
It all depends on the quality of the online school. Look, I will say that I think people with these non-traditional and unique backgrounds don't realize how much of an asset it could be if you tell your story the right way. And so what I'm hearing there is really intriguing to me. Like if I was looking at a bunch of applications and someone who has that experience was on the list, I think I'll look at that twice and say, wow, okay, this is unique. Let me learn more about this person. Again, which is why in your application, I'm suggesting to make sure that what's unique about you, make sure it kind of pops out, make sure that people see that. So I would be very interested in the full application package for this person, okay? Does it make sense that their only way to get the prerequisites done was to do it online at a place that was reputable, and they did very, very well? That would be kind of one scenario. It all sort of needs to make sense. So if that is what makes the most sense for you, and that's the only thing you can do, I think it's worth trying. You just never know. I mean, I will say that as much as we try very much to have structure, there are just some things that you can't predict how they're going to go in terms of application review. So I think it's worth trying. If that's all you can do, then you can only do your best.
All right. Our next question we have for you is, what does your weekly routine look like as a physician scientist?
Yes, my weekly routine is as follows. I mentioned earlier that most physician scientists spend about 80% of their time doing research. Because I do procedures, I spend a little less time. So I spend about 40% of my time doing clinical work, which means 2 days a week. And so the way it works out for me is that Monday and Tuesday are my clinical days. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are a mixture of my lab, admin, leadership, et cetera, et cetera. I like that breakdown, although I think I need to change it for one or two reasons, but that's sort of how my week looks. And it's kind of nice. I mean, the one thing to mention is your patients don't get sick only on your clinical days, or your patients don't need you only on your clinical days. So I can't say, oh, it's Wednesday, I'm sorry. You're constantly wearing both hats, and many times I'm in the hospital and I'm seeing something with a patient that's making me think about a research question and think, wow, we should do this. So truly, even though you might have these breakdowns, I think you're always carrying both the clinical side and the research side in your mind and in what you do. I was going to make one other point about that, which is that, yeah, I lost that train of thought. Maybe it'll come back to me, but that's how my week looks.
Your next question is, what is the roadmap of the MSTP program, and what is the pathway each student takes?
Yes, I'll try to break that down really quickly. That's a very big question. So with the latest UCLA curriculum, so most schools are either doing 2 years of preclinical work or something like 1 year or 1.5 or 1+ year. So there are these two buckets. But generally speaking, you do 1 or 2 years of basic science courses, then you transition to the PhD, then you come back and you finish the clinical parts of med school. Our curriculum is such that in the first year, you'll actually do all of the basic science work. In the second year, you'll do most of your clinical clerkships, then you transition to the PhD. And the advantage of that is that you have now done the basic sciences and you have had the clinical exposure to know which clinical interest you have. And then that might help you pick a research topic or research area better. I'd say a lot of MSTP programs are in the period of transitioning to try to give more clinical exposure early so that the MD PhD students are able to better pick labs they're interested in or research areas they're interested in that aligns with the clinical interest. There are a lot of questions, so I'm going to be shorter in my answers, I promise.
No problem. All right, our next question we have is, what advice do you have towards exploring what kind of research you want to do/study?
Yeah, no real advice. I think you just have to look around and see what speaks to you. Some people pick a research area because a family member had a heart attack or cancer or things like that. That's something that might drive you. Some people pick it because of a personal health interest. Some people pick it because it's just fascinating. You might read a news article about a pig heart being transplanted into a human and you're just like, whoa, that's crazy, I want to do that. So there's really no set way, and some people may have to do multiple research experiences to find what they like.
Dr. Ajijola, can you talk about social science also, research in social science, and if that's accepted, as research as well?
Absolutely. It is. Thank you for doing that. My bias is not to. So yes, we actually have a social sciences track within our MD PhD program. So most times when you think of an MD PhD, you're thinking of going into a wet lab and pipetting or working with animals. But a good, actually about of our program, I think we have about 15 or 16 that are social sciences. So they're usually doing a PhD in anthropology or sociology or sometimes public health. And that kind of research might be related to something like, I'm interested in studying why people become homeless and then turn to drug use. Like, what is the specific thing that happens? That's a type of a social science project, or trying to understand behaviors that exist within a certain disease community, or social determinants of health, that kind of thing. So if you have, just to say one important thing is that if that's the type of research you've had, but then when you're proposing to go to an MD PhD program and you start talking about doing biochemistry research, that may not make a lot of sense, because I would think you don't know much about biochemistry research because you have no experience doing that type of research. So why would I expect that you have a reasonable understanding to make that transition? So part of all of this is making sure that your application makes sense. So if you're going to do social sciences, and that's your background, makes sense. If you're going to do basic sciences, that's your background, makes sense. If you're going to transition, then you have to have a good story or good explanation for why you're doing that.
Our next question we have for you today is, would you say that a co-author publication is required prior to applying to the MD PhD due to the competitivity of the MD PhD programs nowadays?
Absolutely not required. Absolutely not required. It's good if you have a co-author publication, but it's not required. Because someone may have done a lot of research, but the paper just hasn't been published yet, or they've done a lot of research, and the paper is going to be in Nature, but it's just not been submitted yet, or it's making its way through the peer review process. Or they've done a lot of research and the research didn't work out, but they learned a ton during the research. I'd still be interested in that kind of, because that was actually my experience. My undergraduate research project was a disaster. It actually didn't work out. But if someone told me I did this research, it didn't work out, but I learned this, this is how I troubleshot, these are the experiments I did. And then if I interviewed them and they spoke intelligently about their research experience and how they did research and what they learned, I'd be happy to take that person into my program.
This is again people listening to rumors and false information that because a lot of people do a lot of good work and they spend a lot of good amount of time on research, but they don't get published, but they still learn a lot about it. But yeah, I mean, these are things that I always read, on blog posts, and I just, anyway, sorry.
No worries. Well, I know we're coming close to time. There's two questions I see. One says, how did you do research while you were in med school? I went to a med school that was one of the first ones, I think, to lump 2 years of basic sciences into one. So it freed up a year for you to do research. And then I took a second year. So I actually had protected time in med school, which is Duke University. Many schools have that now, Stanford, UCLA, et cetera. Do you believe that pursuing both an MD and a PhD separately allows you to engage in more clinical work? I don't know what you mean by more clinical work, but it certainly allowed me to do my research in an area that was very close to my clinical work. And so what I'm able to do is literally, you might laugh at this, but the same thing that I do in a human patient, we do in pigs and in mice in the lab. And so that kind of ability to bounce back and forth between models for research, I think really facilitates how much we enjoy doing the type of research we do.
There's only one question also that is, what advice would you give to a parent of a student interested in MD PhD?
Very, very interesting question. And this is an important one. I know we're on time and I technically need to go, but I really want to stay to answer this, okay? Sometimes what can happen is that when families don't understand what being an MD PhD is, how long it takes, what the student is doing during that time, they are sometimes unable to support the student the way they should. Because instead of saying, okay, I know what you're doing, keep at it, I know what the end goal is and how this is going to work out for you. When they don't know that, what ends up happening is that the types of questions and the concerns that start to come up can create doubt in the student. And so one of the things that actually I've been thinking about doing, and I heard, and this isn't my idea because I heard somebody else was doing it, but is at the white coat ceremony, is to actually have a session for parents and families to explain to them what an MD PhD is, why your loved one might be very busy for a long time, but what they're going to get out of it at the end of the day, and really celebrate this process and this journey that this person is about to go on. It really helps the families, and I think it definitely helps the person feel supported. So I think families, it's very important for them to try to learn about the process. And for those of you who are thinking about doing MD PhD, I think it's important for you to help your family understand what that is. And if you have a mentor that's even willing to talk to your parents or your family, for you to take advantage of that. That's that's my soapbox.
You have to go. We've held you 2 minutes longer. So thank you again for making time for us. And I know that your busy schedule, and sorry for keeping you over for 2 minutes.
Not at all. My absolute pleasure. I was in your shoes not that long ago. Please keep the path.